Hello everyone. Today I'd like to speak about the ERSI report on the Irish economy. The Economic Social Research Institute has come out with a report on the condition of the Irish economy and a couple of factors I want to delve into in the next few minutes. One of those would be house prices. They spoke about house prices and say that they are 10% overvalued in Ireland. Now, I think this is on the completely conservative side of house prices. Most house prices are completely out of the reach of ordinary people. We've seen that being created by the chaos of government policies that have facilitated the bankers, the developers, and the big investment companies at the expense of ordinary people. And in particular, we've seen an exponential increase in house prices and rents over the last 5 to 10 years. House prices are nearly 14% above what they were pre-crash. We all know what happened there. That led to devastating austerity for ordinary people, while the bankers were bailed out and ordinary people carried the can for that. But according to this report, it has a couple of startling facts and interesting facts as well. Speaking about the supply factors, now this year the government said there would be up to 40 or 50,000 homes built. This is well below the estimations by the RSI, by many more, the housing agencies and so forth, who said we need upward of 60,000 per year to be built to keep up with supply with the increase in population growth. Of course, this has an implication on keeping accommodation costs high as well. But this goes against the narrative to drive their economy, and this is what it's all about fundamentally. If you delve a little bit deeper into these figures, they also spoke about interest rate reductions would lead to fuel and property price increases and real wage and growth. This is just a complete fallacy when ordinary people, and one in five in particular, are on low wages in our society. Now, it's interesting because a lot of these government policies help inflate the market, such as the Help to Buy scheme, the shared equity schemes, and these other schemes. And this was admitted last week by James Geoghegan, a newly elected Fine Gael TD, who said that they weren't going to increase the amount given on the Help to Buy scheme to first time buyers because they knew this would add to price inflation. Now, they finally admitted the elephant in the room that everybody knows, that these schemes just enhance the coffers of bankers and developers and force more debt on ordinary people. But of course, they won't tell you that. What they'll tell you is that you have to get on the property market and do whatever it takes to get in that property market. Profits have never been at higher levels for the bankers. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are looking to get rid of the cap on bankers' salaries. Surprise, surprise. And at the same time, they're looking at, as I said, interest rate reductions, the European Central Bank, which will again fuel property price increases again for more and more people. Now, when will this bubble burst? You might say. Now, at some point, most certainly will, with many global downturns. And the central bank itself have increased the mortgage lending rules from 3.5 times people's salaries up to 4 times people's salaries. That was back in 22, which again was argued about increasing the value of homes. But again, this was ignored by the politicians. And even the Bankers Payments Federation, chaired by ex-Fine Gaeler Brian Hayes, has spoken to this also. And he said that a lot of issues are happening with supply slowing down. And this is creating huge issues in our society and going to create huge chaos moving forward. As the population has increased exponentially over the last number of years, we've seen the population increase by 2 to 3% in the last 12 to 15 months. And of course, this is putting pressure on accommodation costs. And this comes in the same context when the Europe or the ERSI is speaking about increasing the labour supply market in terms of the construction sector. Now, currently, 176,000 people are employed in the construction sector, and many of these are working on commercial properties and buildings all around Dublin City and all around Ireland. And back in 2007, we had about 240,000 that worked in the construction sector. Now, so many have emigrated, and this is a huge issue. Many of our young, recently graduated or recently apprenticed workers are working in Australia and many other countries as well because they can't find accommodation here, which creates a huge quandary and a social dilemma and a crisis for the Irish political establishment, because they're now looking for cheaper labour to come in to replace the workers that they can't, and they forced to export as well over many, many years and still continues to do to this day as well. Now, as on top of this, the accommodation issue will come into crisis for those who for looking for cheap labour. And then you see so many landlords exploiting renters in the private rental market, many in overcrowded conditions, living 10 to 15 people in some homes, to supply this cheap labour to fuel this artificial economy that benefits the very wealthy in society and generates more profits pushing to the top of society rather than being filtered down. And that is very clear with a recent ERSI report which spoke about the exploitation and the lack of inspection of cheap migrant labour. It also spoke to issues around the implications of the wealthier getting wealthier in society in terms of the growing divide between the top earners in society, maybe those who work for the big tech companies and finance companies and pharma companies, versus those who work in low pay, low skill jobs such as retail, hospitality, food services, and many other sectors as well of society, and construction as well, what they're looking for. So this is what's been driving this economy. It's completely artificial, and it's going to have huge implications moving into the future. But of course, who's going to suffer? Ordinary people are suffering because of these policies, and it will come to a head at some point, because we see the crises created by the immigration chaos on top of the disasters we've already had with the housing and rental market in Ireland too. So it's very important to look behind the figures and what's really happening and what's driving these figures as well, and what they're really talking about when they're talking about an increase in GDP figures as well. Rather than having a strong, resilient domestic economy, that we should be able to provide the needs of our citizens and also to supply a basic needs such as having a home at a reasonable cost. Home ownership rates in Ireland has declined at a massive rate. At the same time, more and more people are reinforced into private rented accommodation, bigger percent of the population there as well. And then pressures are being put on that sector as well. And who's coming in? The vulture funds to save the day, all at the behest of government policies, charging extortionate rents, and then forcing many, many people into homelessness out the other end of what's going on. And at the sharpest end, we see so many people who are dying on the streets, which is all implicated with these deliberate, inhumane policies that benefit the bankers, benefit the very wealthy in society, and at the behest of the government, always work in their favour. That'll keep their profits high, while ordinary people are the ones that always carry the can, whether through high private debt in terms of mortgage debt, people as well struggling in precarious living conditions with housing, in terms of high rents, not entertaining the prospect of having a home to call their own, and also the implications at the sharpest end of those who cannot afford to live in their homes because of, as I said, extortionate rents and being forced out onto the streets, and then not to mention the lack of investment in working class communities all around Dublin City and all around Ireland as well. In particular, the council flat complexes fallen into absolute abject condition, so the private profiteers can move in to gentrify these areas and force working class communities from their communities. So again, they'll continue this cycle time and time again until the bubble bursts. And it is important as well to look behind these real figures when they're talking about it, and look behind the drivers of what is being fueled by low wages, low pay, to keep the profits high and to keep inequalities deepening in our society. So thanks for the support of my videos, really appreciate them, and please press subscribe to my YouTube channel. Take care, Slán.